only child living with my mom and dad in a house that's probably too big for just the three of us. My parents always joked that they never planned to stop at one kid. They just never got around to having more. Anyway, I was 15 when this happened. It was a rainy Saturday night in May. I can't remember the exact date, but I know it was one of the last weekends before summer break. There's something you should know about me before I get into it. I have a bunch of weird medical issues. I get panic attacks, faint easily, sometimes have trouble breathing, and I need complete silence to sleep. Total silence. Even a little fan humming is enough to keep me awake. So, rain? Rain is the worst. People always say the sound of rain soothes them. Not me. It keeps me up all night. And in my town, we don't get rain often, but when we do, it comes down hard. This night wasn't a thunderstorm, but it was coming down steady, loud enough that I knew sleep was out of the question. After tossing and turning for hours, I gave up. I needed to move, get some energy. That's when I decided to go for a walk in the rain. It wasn't the first time I'd done that. My parents were weirdly supportive of it. We live in a super safe area, and our backyard practically connects to a huge, well-lit public park. It's not unusual to see people walking there even late at night. I threw on a rain jacket, crept downstairs, and slipped outside. No umbrella, no phone. I knew the screen would just keep me awake longer. The world felt calm in that eerie, rain-drenched way. The trees swayed, their leaves dripping water like melting icicles, and everything smelled fresh and wet. For a while, it helped. I felt peaceful. After maybe 20 minutes, I turned back toward home, finally starting to feel sleepy. Then I saw it. At first, it looked like a long, dark shape lying in the middle of the road. Maybe a garbage bag or some debris. But the longer I looked, the more I realized what I was actually seeing. A person. Face down. Completely still. My stomach dropped. My first thought was that they'd been hit by a car. What else could explain someone lying motionless in the street during a downpour? I wanted to ignore it, just keep walking, but I couldn't. My parents taught me to help people, so I pushed down my fear and walked toward the figure. As I got closer, I could make out black pants and a dark plaid shirt. Not exactly rainwear. It looked like a man, though I'd already assumed that. Suddenly, I noticed how cold the rain felt, like it had turned from lukewarm to freezing in a split second. My skin was crawling, but I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or the situation. That's when I heard it. A screech, high and broken, rang out behind me. It wasn't human. It sounded like an injured animal, but off somehow. My whole body tensed. I spun around, heart pounding, and scanned the tree line. Nothing. Whatever made that sound was deeper in the woods, but I couldn't see a thing. And then I turned back to the road. The man wasn't lying down anymore. He was sitting up, perfectly upright, staring directly at me. My vision narrowed. I couldn't breathe. The rain blurred everything except for his face, and that smile. He stood up, slowly at first. Then he started sprinting toward me, full speed, with a huge grin and something glinting in his hand. A knife. I didn't even have time to think. I ran. I don't remember telling my legs to move. They just did. Behind me, I heard him scream, "I'll kill you!" The grass was slick and impossible to run on, but I figured it was just as bad for him. I didn't want to lead him back to my house, so I bolted toward the woods, toward where that screech had come from just moments earlier. I didn't care anymore. Anywhere was better than near him. I tore through the trees, not daring to look back. I was terrified that if I stopped, I'd pass out and he'd catch me. I had no idea if he was still chasing me. I just kept running until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. I ducked behind a thick tree and tried to steady my breath. I finally risked a look behind me. Nothing. I waited there, drenched and shaking, for what felt like forever, probably 20 minutes. Eventually, I took the long route home, looping around the back of the park and slipping onto my street from the opposite end. No one followed. No one was there. I made it home, climbed into bed soaking wet, and just laid there, wide awake, heart still hammering. To this day, I have no explanation for what happened. The man, the knife, that screech. I don't know if they were connected or if I just got hit with two nightmares at once. Maybe he heard the sound too, panicked, and snapped when he saw me. Or maybe he was just insane. I'll never know. But years later, I still think about that night more than I'd like to admit. This happened when I was really young, second or third grade maybe. My memory's hazy when it comes to most things from that time, but this night stands out, and you're about to see why. It was a regular school day, and it had been pouring rain non-stop. My parents picked me up, dropped me off at home, and then left for some fancy event, a fundraiser, dinner party, something like that. They were supposed to come back that night, but the storm got worse, like dangerously worse. So they made the safe call and spent the night at a friend's place closer to the event. I remember them calling the house phone to apologize over and over for leaving me home alone. I kept insisting I was fine. I wasn't hungry, and honestly, I was kind of excited to have the house to myself. No bedtime, unlimited candy. What kid wouldn't be thrilled? Before hanging up, my mom gave me a short list of things to do before bed. Lock all the doors and windows, close the blinds, and keep one light on in the house. At the time, I didn't think it was a big deal. I figured I'd just do all that stuff right before I went to sleep. But of course, I never made it that far. I parked myself on the living room couch, watching TV until the sugar crash from all the candy hit me hard. I ended up falling asleep without doing anything my mom had asked. I woke up a few hours later, freezing. Not just chilly, like bone-deep cold. The TV had gone into sleep mode, which meant I'd been out for at least 3 hours. I dragged myself off the couch, annoyed, but I remembered the list and decided to handle it so I wouldn't get in trouble. I went around the house locking doors, closing blinds, checking windows. Everything was shut tight. Still, the house felt way colder than it should have. I even checked for drafts, but found nothing. I chalked it up to the storm and sleepily climbed upstairs to my bedroom. That's when I realized just how bad the storm had gotten. The rain pounded against my window like it wanted in, and the thunder was loud enough to rattle the walls. I wasn't afraid of storms, but I did start to worry that a tree might crash through the roof. I laid in bed, wide awake, trying to fall asleep. But something else started bothering me. Creaking sounds. Soft, irregular, almost like footsteps. But my floor was carpeted, so that didn't make sense. It wasn't the kind of creaking you'd expect from wind or swaying trees. It felt wrong. The sound kept me on edge. I sat up in bed and scanned the room, listening. Then a flash of lightning lit up everything for a split second. Everything looked normal, until I noticed the closet. The door was open, only slightly, but enough to know something had moved it. I know it was shut before. I was 100% certain. Something was in my room. I didn't scream, didn't even breathe loud. I just slowly got out of bed and walked to my door like I was walking a tightrope over a pit. Every step felt like it took a year. Once I was out of the room, I bolted downstairs and crawled under the dining room table. That's when I finally let myself cry. I was alone, terrified, and helpless. Then I heard footsteps, but they weren't normal. It sounded like someone jumping or stumbling down the stairs, unsteady, chaotic. My heart sank. Whoever, whatever, had been in my closet was now coming for me. I held my breath. The footsteps reached the dining room. I could see legs, Bare, filthy, yellow-tinted legs covered in cuts. They looked like they'd been dragged through broken glass. I couldn't even tell if they were a man's or a woman's, just disfigured and wrong. Then they dropped something, a wrench. It hit the floor with a loud clang, and I swear I nearly screamed. If they bent down to grab it, they'd see me. I was sure of it. But they didn't. They just stood there, frozen. A silent standoff. Then, finally, they moved on. I heard them stumbling around the first floor for what felt like forever. And then, the front door opened and shut. They were gone. I stayed under that table for a long time, too shaken to move. Eventually, I crept out, picked up the wrench, and locked the front door. Then I went back to bed like nothing happened. I didn't tell my parents. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared they'd be mad that I hadn't locked everything earlier. Or maybe I just didn't have the words to explain it. Years later, I finally told them the story. It took some convincing before they believed me. But by then, it was too late for anything to be done about it. I slept with a nightlight after that, for years. I was terrified of the dark, of closets, of creaking wood. That night scarred me more than I ever admitted out loud. So if you take anything from this story, seriously, lock your doors. I'm 29, and to be honest, not much helps me clear my head like camping. I'm not talking about national parks or campgrounds with other families nearby. I mean the real kind of camping. No people, no phones, no noise but the wind in the trees and the water rushing by. I grew up in Northern California, and over the years, I've gotten good at finding those quiet, off-the-map places. The kind of spots where it feels like you've fallen off the edge of the world. This happened a few months ago after a really rough breakup. It was one of those messy, drawn-out ends where neither of you want to admit it's over, but you both know it is. After it finally ended, I felt like my chest had been hollowed out. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to be around people. So I threw some gear into my truck, tent, food, sleeping bag, handgun, and drove off without a real plan. I just knew I wanted to be alone. Eventually, I remembered this spot I'd found once years ago, a little bend in a river about 2 hours from where I grew up. It wasn't marked on any map, just a place I'd stumbled across while exploring. Getting there meant taking a half-forgotten dirt road that wound through miles of forest. I hadn't seen another soul for ages, until I turned onto that narrow path that led to the river. 2 trucks were already there, one gray, one white, parked just off the trailhead. No people in sight, just the vehicles sitting there like ghosts. My stomach sank. I'd driven all this way for solitude, and now it looked like someone else had beaten me to it. I sat there for a while, weighing my options. I could turn back, but that meant hours of driving and nowhere guaranteed to be better. I told myself it was a long river. Odds were, those people were camped somewhere far enough that I'd never even know they were there. I started down the trail with my pack. After about 15 minutes of hiking along the riverbank, I spotted them. 2 guys standing by the water, supposedly fishing. They looked like your typical outdoorsy types. Flannel shirts, beards, work boots. But something felt off. One of them noticed me coming and quickly tossed a jacket over something on the ground. Then he gave me this weird half-smile. "Hey," he said, a little too loud. "Don't worry, we're just doing some target shooting at cans. Didn't mean to freak you out or anything." I nodded politely, but didn't answer. I just kept walking. It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. Rushed, forced, like he'd rehearsed it. It left me with this uneasy feeling, but I chalked it up to the usual awkwardness you sometimes get from strangers in the woods. I finally found a decent spot about 10 minutes further down the river. It wasn't ideal, but it was hidden enough that I felt alone again. I set up camp, pulled out a book, and tried to let the quiet settle me. Rain started falling lightly soon after, but I welcomed it. Something about the sound of rain against the trees always calms me. As it got darker, I walked down to the river to clear my head, listening to the water and trying not to think about my ex. That's when I noticed someone standing across the river, one of the guys from earlier. He waved, and after a moment's hesitation, I waved back. He yelled something, asking for my name. I don't know why I answered. I normally wouldn't, but I called back, "Anisha." He stood still for a second, then slowly pulled something out of his jacket. It wasn't a phone. It was a disposable camera. Before I could even react, he lifted it and took a picture of me. Then he turned and walked off without a word. I went back to my campsite, shaken. That wasn't normal. Not even close. I stayed close to my tent, flashlight in hand, and planned to leave first thing in the morning. But I didn't get the chance. Later that night, after I'd crawled into my tent and tried to sleep, I heard something. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching on wet leaves. Not animals, not wind. Someone was circling the camp. Every instinct in my body told me who it was. I didn't wait. I reached for my handgun and unzipped the tent as quietly as I could. Rain was still falling in a steady patter, masking some of the noise. I stepped out, heart pounding in my ears, and flicked on my flashlight. There he was, just a few yards away, half concealed behind a tree. He wasn't smiling, wasn't scowling either, just blank, like he was looking straight through me. He had something in his hand. It was an axe. I raised my gun immediately and told him, voice shaking but firm, "Leave, now, or I'll kill you." He didn't move, didn't blink. After a few tense seconds, he muttered something. "Ivan said I shouldn't come find you," he mumbled. "But I took care of Ivan." That chilled me to the bone. I didn't wait. I fired a warning shot into the trees just above his head. He flinched, surprised, and stumbled back. I leveled the gun at him again and told him to drop the axe. He did, slowly. Then I told him to take off his shoes. He hesitated, but finally complied. I figured he'd have a much harder time following me barefoot in the woods. I made him empty his pockets and toss out anything he had. Then I told him to grab my gear from the tent, one item at a time where I could see it. The whole time, I never took my eyes off him. Once I had the essentials, I grabbed his boots and chucked them deep into the trees, then told him to walk the other direction and not look back. The moment he vanished into the darkness, I ran. I didn't stop. The trail was muddy, hard to see, and every sound made my skin crawl. I didn't know if he was following me barefoot through the woods, or if someone else, maybe Ivan, was out there too. But I wasn't going to wait around and find out. When I finally saw the glow of my truck headlights, still untouched in the trail pullout, I almost cried. I threw my pack in, locked the doors, and tore out of there. I didn't call the cops until I was a good 30 minutes down the main road. I gave them everything I could, location, descriptions, what he said about Ivan. They said they'd look into it. I haven't heard anything since. What really haunts me, even now, is the thought of what he meant by taking care of Ivan. I don't know if Ivan was even real, but if he was, I'm afraid of what they might have found in those woods. And I'm just glad I walked away with my life.